All right, what's up, everybody? It's Alec here, and we are back at it again with another episode of the Smashing Brands podcast. Today, I am joined by Justin. Justin, thanks for being here.
Great to be here.
So, the first question I always like to ask people on my podcast is, how do you spend your time on planet Earth?
Wow. How do I spend time on planet Earth? Well, right now, you're asking me with a 4-month-old, a 4-year-old, and a 6-year-old, which is completely different if you had asked me this question 6 years ago. But right now, I'm a father of three, a newborn,
Yeah,
and I'm trying to just take each day day by day.
that's exciting, man. Well, congrats on that. And what would you say people most know you for?
I would say bringing levity to meetings, making things a little bit easier. I think I'm in the co-working world, and it's not life or death. We take our job very seriously, but at the end of the day, the employees that work for us want to feel, excited to come in every day. So I kind of de-stress the stressful situation. So I think they know me as a guy who kind of brings levity, a little bit more humor to the everyday situation.
Absolutely. And just to clarify for anybody watching, we're talking here about Industrious. So Justin here is one of the co-founders of Industrious, which is really awesome. I mean, I built my entire career off the people I met at co-working spaces, to be honest. Like I go back
Wow.
to we worked 2015 or whatever it was, that's where it really started for me, and back when I started my agency back then, it's like the connections that I made at the co-working spaces that really made, a big impact in my life. And to this day, like I I love co-working spaces. Nowadays I work from home more often than not, but I love the concept. I'm always at a co-working space, and Industrious is one of those co-working spaces that has really been on the come up recently. But I want to know, like, where did it all start for you and your co-founder?
Yeah, so we started this in 2012. The first
Yeah.
one opened in 2013. I was working for a company out of China that brought Chinese investors to the US. There's about 60 of them in China. There was one of me in the US.
Hmm.
They gave me a $600 budget a month to find an office, and the only $600 option was this new thing that I never heard of, was co-working.
Yeah.
And this was pre-WeWork era, and there was a place called, well, I won't name the name, but there was a place that I had worked at that wasn't just, it was just more of like a social place, not really a place to get a lot of work done, but it is all I had. And I brought all the investors to this one place, and no one really took me seriously. There was like a keg in the corner and razor
Yeah.
scooters, and it just wasn't like a professional environment.
Yeah.
So I would then move my meetings to like a Ritz-Carlton or a Four Seasons in their lobby, and it was just pretty clear that the investors were taking me a lot more seriously there than they were at my co-working space with the
Yeah.
same pitch. I looked the same, I acted the same. It was just the surroundings, and it became very clear that we needed to elevate, or I needed to elevate a new way for people to work, because the place that I was working at was the only option at the time. And I realized I wasn't the only 20 something or soon to be 30 something that wanted to have something more flexible. And
Yeah.
if this was the only option, I knew there was an opportunity to kind of disrupt that industry.
And what was your business at that time?
It was a company that I was out of China. It was bringing EB5 money. So basically, if you invested a certain amount of money into the US and different real estate projects, you were given a green card. So these
Yeah.
wealthy investors from Asia came to the US to deploy that capital. And I was the one who kind of found the different opportunities to where that capital should go.
So that was your business?
That's where I worked out of.
Oh, okay.
I worked for that company. Yeah, so I was an
I see.
employee.
Okay. So, you take these people, these investors to this place that is not professional. You're like, hey, something needs to change. Like, then what happens? Because this is like a very interesting business. it's not super straightforward to start. In a lot of ways, it can be complicated. So I want to know, like, what was that journey? Like, okay, you had the idea, then what?
Had the idea, knew that I wanted to do it with someone else. I think that, just it's hard to do anything by yourself. So to have someone to bounce things off of and to kind of like help build that plan is what I
Yeah,
wanted to do. And Jimmy Hodari, who's our CEO, who's my co-founder, was that person. And we've been childhood best friends since we were 1 years old, and kind of brought this to his attention. And he was working out of another shared office space, but his was a different experience than mine was. His was very sterile and very boring. And he was like, wow, I would kill for someone to have a razor scooter and a keg. And it became very clear that both of us were experiencing places that we were just not happy with 8 hours a day. We were spending more time there than we were at our actual apartments. And
yeah,
that's where we were like, we gotta do something about it. If people are spending this amount of time in an office, they better enjoy it, not just watch the time go by.
yeah. Okay. So,
I'm gonna open my door because my dog is
yeah.
trying to get out. There we go. All right.
Yeah, and what can be one of the most challenging things is like finding a co-founder, somebody that you work well with and that you trust. And just the fact that, you and Jamie knew each other since like the very beginning, I think that like made that synergy work. Like you guys already had that deep connection. It wasn't like you guys met at a networking event. But why did you go to Jamie? So it was your idea. Is that what you're saying? So it started with your idea and then kind of bounce it
I
off
think
of
it was
him.
both of our ideas, but I think I was maybe the first that kind of identified like this sucked. Like I think Jamie was more content in his space. He was like, whatever. Mine was like, I can't work here. It's not allowing me to do business. So I think we both recognized together that this was something that was a hole in the market. But why Jamie? I think Jamie was more of listen, at the end of the day, this is a marriage, and like you can say whatever you want, but like I spend more time with Jamie than my actual wife, and
Yeah.
I have more disagreements than my actual wife, and I think, I could never have done this with just a stranger. Like even though I might have gone along with a person for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 2 months or 2 years, like I've known Jamie through everything in my life. So our disagreements we have now or conflicts, it's just like it's like a brother. And I think if I had this conflict or concerns with other people, it would be a problem. None of these are problems with him. So I wanted to bring someone that I felt like I could trust and feel comfortable with.
Yeah, I think that's really underrated advice, what you're saying, is because there's a lot of people that, like pitch like, hey, come to this conference, come to this event, you might be able to meet your co-founder, whatever. But the reality is kind of like if you want a co-founder, think back to who you already know and who you can trust.
Yeah.
Right? Because like you gotta really not only trust that person, but have experience working with them or at least knowing them for a long period of time. So that's an interesting like I like that perspective and what you're saying, which is like this was the guy because this is a guy I knew for a while. And this is a guy that, and you guys had different level. Well, here's the other part of that can be challenging with finding a co-founder is somebody that is not as good at certain things as
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we're both different people. So if we were both similar, this would make no sense. He's very strategic, very methodical, and I'm more like shoot from the hip, what my gut says, and we act in completely different directions, which is what you need in a co-founder. So too many
yeah,
people I know who've started a company with a co-founder, chances are it hasn't gone so well. It might have not gone well in year one, two, three, or four, but maybe all of a sudden when something big happens, like COVID or whatever, that's when it's really tested. And I've seen too many co-founders just not do well as a result. So I think from our standpoint, it's gone well because of the history we've had.
absolutely. And so I want to keep going on this, talking about the story. So you had the idea well, did it start in 2012 or you got the idea in
The idea was
2012?
probably in 2011, and then it started again and get executed in like late 11, early 12.
Yeah, so what's the story around the first location?
First location was, well, we're both from Michigan, and we thought should be done? Should this thing be done in Detroit, where all of our friends and family are? And Detroit was a little too, it was too early at that point to do it. And in New York, it was New York where we were living. That's our backyard. And it was just, everything was so expensive. So if you're from Michigan, you either move to New York, Chicago, or LA. And most of our friends were in the Chicago region or so Chicago area. And we kind of asked them, we're like, hey, this is an idea we have. Like, if this got brought to your city, would you do it? And very bare bones business plan, kind of discussing what it would look like and feel like. And so many of our friends and their friends were like, oh my God, if this came to Chicago, I'm in. So we were like, let's test it in Chicago. Chicago only had one co-working space at that time. It was more of like an incubator. And then there was the traditional Regis's, but nothing like, nothing built the way we had expected it to be. And we tested it in Chicago, and we had about 70 spots that we could fill.
Yeah.
And we had over 800 applications before there was even drywall up.
Oh,
So when
wow.
we took the applications and we said, all right, we're going to change it and make this a non-refundable security deposit. Let's see
Yeah.
if those 800 people are still interested. And that 800 got dwindled to like 200. But we
Still a lot.
still filled up this space pre-construction, even with like a logo,
Yeah.
with the idea that there was such a desire for this product in that market
Yeah.
that it became abundantly clear this was not just a Chicago problem. This was an Atlanta problem, an Minneapolis problem, a St. Louis, a Seattle, etc. And that's when once Chicago kind of started being a success right out of the gate, even before there were members, that's when we were like, this is hot. We need to continue growing this.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, you filled up the first space, and then what was expansion like? Like, you raised money from investors, right? And all that. Like, what was that whole process?
Yeah, I mean, we had to
I wanted,
raise one point.
so I
Go
want to
ahead.
ask you, for the first location, you guys use your own money for that, or how did that all get funded?
No, we had to raise $1.2 million, which is insane amount of money when you've never done anything before.
Yeah,
And no one would take us seriously with like private equity or VC. So it was all friends and family. And it's not like friends and family are gonna, we only need 3 or 4 people. We needed like hundreds of people. So it was a lot of $5,000 checks, a lot of $10,000 checks, a lot of my mom's bridge partner's nephew, my aunt's best friend's golf instructor. Like it was like going down that line, and it was a lot of just random people. But I think what people said was, I'm willing to lose $5,000 or $10,000 if it doesn't work out. But I would love to know that $5,000 or $10,000 turned into 50 or 100 or even $1 million. So they were taking a bet on us more
yeah.
than the actual concept, and which is easier to do when you do $5,000, $10,000 checks. When you're raising millions of dollars, this concept has to work. But that's what it was. It was just really a lot of early investors who were just taking a bet on us and this concept that we were telling them about.
Yeah, this is incredibly interesting because it's like you go from working at this 9 to 5 job thinking, hey, I have this idea, to being like having the audacity and the confidence to be like, all right, we need to raise this money. I'm gonna go to everybody I can and sell them on that concept. So like,
Yeah, you have to
what?
have no shame. That's the hard part. Like it's embarrassing and like strange to ask your friend's brother for money, but like at the end of the day, that's who you have to go for. You have to be doing people who actually know you rather than putting a Craigslist post out there. Like you have to go with families and friends.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to know, like, where did that like conviction come from? Like with you and Jamie to be like, we're gonna go out and do this. Like, 'cause it's just such like a stretch from what you were doing just like a year prior, you know? So it's just I find it fascinating. Like
I think it's
the
just
psychological
it's
shift.
no, it's confidence. I think you just have to, it's a little of fake it before you make it kind of a philosophy, but I think it's just more like, listen, if you believe in something, you're going to get other people to believe it as well. And this wasn't like a fake belief of like, this was like, I really think this is going to work. I'm a customer of this product. I would pay $600, $700 for this a month. If people are spending $2,000 for their office rent in Chicago and they're only there for when they're sleeping, well,
Yeah.
why wouldn't they spend $1,500 for it when they're actually up during the day? So it was just something that I think both of us were passionate about. And I
Yeah.
think you can tell when someone's not passionate about something they're selling, you can see right through it. So I think when we were passionate about it, I think other people became passionate about it as well. So it was just about having no shame and being confident and going out to as many people as we could.
Yeah, absolutely. So you do the first location, and then what's the story around the next location?
So the first location was successful, and when literally the second day of its opening, when it was full and there was a waiting list, most people would say test it out, find the kinks before you grow.
Yeah.
Especially my parents were like, don't go crazy here. And this is where I was like, no, no, no. Like if it's not going to be us, it's going to be someone else.
Yeah.
And I tried this out. So we literally went to our initial investors and said, hey, we know you put $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 in this Chicago location. We want to try this out again. And we thought the next viable spot was Atlanta.
Hmm.
So we literally, I think 90% of our original investors said, sure, just here's another 5,000, here's another 10,000. And we did Atlanta. And Atlanta, there's no real science to it. I think the science of it was we were both dating girls from Atlanta who told us to do Atlanta. I wish there was a fancy algorithm that said like Atlanta was the next hot. No, it was our girlfriends were telling us Atlanta. And I'm
Nice.
glad we listened because Atlanta also was the exact same thing that happened in Chicago happened in Atlanta, but even more so. The applications were just like flying before we even had it built because we took the photos of the Chicago space and we kind of applied it to Atlanta. So at least we had a visual for people to see, and more people were interested there than they were initially in Chicago, which was great. So we kind of took that and then kept going and going and going.
Yeah. Awesome. And so at that point, do you have enough, like, I guess what's the word for it? Experience slash social proof to like go to venture capital and be like, hey, we have something here?
No, no, no. I mean, I think, you could say one, you got lucky, two, you got a little luckier, three, okay, maybe you're onto something, but I think we need to have some like real data points across the country. So the
Yeah.
reason why we didn't want to continue growing in Chicago or just doubling down in Atlanta was then investors could easily say, okay, that's an Atlanta thing, that's a Chicago thing. But we wanted to kind of diversify ourselves across the country, not in like the sexy New York, San Francisco, LA's, but we did like second tier markets. So after Atlanta, we did Minneapolis, then we did St. Louis, then we did Raleigh, then we did Columbus, Ohio, and then we did what did we do? Then we did Nashville. So I mean, Nashville, which is hot now, wasn't as hot back then. And we basically tested the market and we basically said, hey, if you're a worker and you want to not work in a stodgy office building and you're in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, chances are this is going to work wherever you live. Could be Fort Lauderdale, it could be Palm Springs. Like this is a product that's going to work everywhere. So it took us about 10 locations for us to actually get the attention of the VCs and the private equity groups out there. But it also didn't hurt that WeWork was growing the same
Yeah.
time we were. So I
Validate
mean,
the concept.
we had other data points in there, and they were growing a lot faster and a lot bigger. And when we were doing this, we were doing like 20,000 square feet. They were taking 200,000 square feet of buildings. They would take even entire buildings, and they were a smashing success. And they had this valuation that obviously we now know now that was not a real valuation, but they were able to get valuations in the billions. And we were still out there, in the 10 million, 15, 20, $30 million range. And that's where like VCs were like, all right, WeWork is too expensive. It's obviously a great concept. What's the next in line? Oh, there's this company called Industrious that's making a scene, and let's kind of give them a little bit of attention.
Yeah. So were you guys always, with all your locations, were you always profitable? Like this first 10 locations, let's
Yeah, the
say?
individual locations were profitable as we started to grow headcount, because it was just me and Jamie, and then we had the community managers. But once we started to, add a COO, CFO, head of design, head of construction, then, it starts to kind of add up. So,
After you raise money, right?
right, right. But of course, the individual locations were profitable.
Yeah, so I find that interesting because I think that was a big differentiator between just you and WeWork, right? Which is WeWork's locations, a lot of them were not very profitable at all
Mhm.
because they just raised so much money. They were just like forced to scale pretty fast, right? Um, so and how I see it is, what's your value? What's your guys' valuation compared to WeWork right now?
Well, it's a whole different game now. I mean, WeWork is in the midst of bankruptcy. So,
Yeah,
at one point they were $47 billion, and that we were not even a sliver of that back in the day. But yeah, it's a completely, who knows what their valuation is right now. Ours is kind of, it changes every so often, but valuation is valuation. Like it can change any day, but theirs is, I don't even know if they even have a valuation right now. They were a public company that now they're not public anymore.
so what do you so as far as like Industrious, so I would say just based off my own opinion, it's on a better trajectory than let's say WeWork is, right? So I want to know like what is it about like you and Jamie and the direction that you've put this company towards that's helped it have that longevity and that potential to continue to, grow and scale in a way that makes sense.
I think we're not distracted by like the shiny objects. There's a lot of amazing buildings out there and a lot of amazing locations with a lot of landlords who are giving a lot of concessions. And I think we're kind of looking at the long game here. And I think WeWork was looking at the short game. I think they were like, great building, great location. Let's take 200,000 square feet and cross our fingers and hope it works. For us,
Yeah,
we're very precise and we say no to more opportunities than we do yes. And those no's kill us. Like it really hurts us because it's like, God, it's such a great building, but we just can't make the economics work. And I
yeah,
think we're very entrepreneurial and of course we take risks, but at the end of the day, there's certain opportunities that we're willing to walk away from more than maybe our competitors. And as a result, 11 years later, we're one of the few co-working companies that are still around that's profitable. So you
yeah,
could argue that, like a great example is in Chicago when we went there, we were like the second co-working company, that went into Chicago. So there was this group called 1871, then there was us, so we were the second. You fast forward to right before COVID, there were 74 different co-working companies. So the amount of people who saw the writing on the wall that, oh my God, you can make so much money and it's so easy. You get a building like, okay, now post-COVID, that number is dropped down to 20. So 50 companies have gone out of business as a
yeah.
result of like trying to be, you know, trying to make some quick bets and hoping it pays off. I think we're just a little more boring. We've said no more than we say yes, so that's kind of what served us right, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you talk about the short game versus the long game? What do you feel like is a long-term game, like the vision of the company moving forward? Is it just expand to more locations, anything more specific?
So we've gone global as of the last couple of years. We're in Asia and Europe.
Yes.
Um, we want to continue growing. We want to stay profitable. I think that's another thing. A lot of companies get profitable and then they don't stay profitable. I think we're like finally like in this moment of like, all right, we're profitable. Let's stay profitable. Let's continue to grow.
Yeah.
We want to grow. We're growing about 45 locations a year, which isn't easy. So we have a small, nimble team on the design, real estate, construction team, probably 1/5 of what it was before, and we're adding more locations, but we're doing it smarter. So it's just continued growing and building our product out there, and then the awareness of what we're doing for not just the small companies, because your point earlier that you met a lot of companies when you were in co-working spaces, I too was that person, but now what's interesting is these larger companies like the Pfizers, the McKinseys, the Disneys, the Coca-Colas, like a lot of these large companies are seeing that the flex is no longer just a thing for like a 5-person company or 10-person company. A lot of these large companies are saying, you know what? I don't need to renew my lease because no one's using the space anymore. I don't need 200,000 square feet. I just need 50,000 square feet. And I'm going to spread that out in different spaces across the country. A little industrious here, a little industrious here. You don't need to just hire.
Okay.
If you work for Coca-Cola, you don't need to move to Atlanta. Coca-Cola will hire you in Raleigh, in San Diego, in Michigan, and that's what they're seeing. They don't need to build this huge facility for their employees anymore.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I want to shift the conversation a little bit because, it's one thing to, I ask entrepreneurs, like what's the key to be successful, how to integrate team, this and that. But what I'm more curious about is like, what are the ways that you like lead yourself every day? What are the things that you do, your habits, your routines, your disciplines that have helped you become the leader that you have become today?
So in the early days, I took everything too seriously. Everything was a problem. Everything was a fire drill. Everything was like an issue. And I've learned to just chill. Like it's a lot easier to just be like, this stuff like is temporary. Like everything, and I'm not a big like mantra, like, but I do believe that like everything happens for a reason. So when something doesn't go right, I'm like, okay, it happened. How can we learn from it? And where do we move on? The olden days, I'd be like, oh my God, something happened. Ah, what do we do? What do we do? And let's fix it. And like sometimes things just aren't not meant to be fixed. And I don't do yoga. I work out very, infrequently, but I am a lot more like zen with like problems and issues and concerns. Like I'm just more like, all right, it happened. Let's move on and let's learn from it and let's fix it and let's not all freak out. So I'm a little bit more zen than I used to be, which allows me to like deal with things like COVID, for instance, was the craziest thing ever. And thank God I became more like chill before, because if I didn't, I don't know if you and I would be talking right now. I would be in another world. So I think I'm just able to just not take things as seriously as they may be, because there's another day and you can fix it.
Absolutely. And that reminds me of like Stoicism, right? In that way, like
Yeah,
what is going on? Like, what do I have the power to change? What do I have the power of not changing? Like
exactly.
control. So I like that. Now I want to know, is there like a particular instance in your life or over the last several years that like was like, oh man, like it kind of forced you to be more zen? You were like, I can't do this anymore. Like something that instigated that mentality.
I mean, I think COVID, but I was a little bit more like that. But like in 2020,
Uh,
we're an office business where you have to be around people. So if any industry was hit the hardest, it was us. And to watch our occupancies go down from like 95% to like
and
15% in a matter of a month, I mean, that's as big of a test as it can be. And I think at that point, when I started, we had about 60 locations at that point. And when I started to see this not just happen in New York, but it happened in Boston and Chicago, like this was not just, this was a global problem. So I had to recognize like, all right, this is happening.
mm.
Let's chill out, because if I freak out, this isn't good for me, our employees, our landlords. So I think it was that moment where I just was like, there's no good that's going to come from just freaking out. And I think since then, there's problems every day, but I'm able to be like, it's not nearly as big of a problem as watching your revenue go down 95% in 10 days. So I think that was a bad moment, but it was a good lesson to kind of like continue life with.
Yeah, absolutely. And this kind of leads into a question I like to ask, which is, this can be in any area of your life, personal, business, but what do you feel was like the hardest thing that's ever happened to you that turned out to be like the greatest blessing?
I mean, I hate to go back to COVID, but it was COVID. Like it was the best blessing, because it really, having an industrious or having a shared office or a flex space pre-COVID was a nice to have. It really was. It was like, hey, how can I make my building different? It was a cool factor to have flex, but at the end of the day, it wasn't like necessary. It really wasn't. COVID happened. It was horrible for our business, but coming on the other side, it really showed landlords that they're not invincible. Like their space was not, like now we're an amenity to their buildings, and a lot of landlords are recognizing us as like a must-have. In order to kind of get other companies excited about your buildings, you need to have flex. No different than having a gym in a building or having, food and beverage. Like having flex is one of those amenities post-COVID to get people to come back to the office. So
Yeah.
in a moment where people are still working from home, landlords need to pull all the strings out there to kind of convince someone to drive 20, 30, 40 minutes to come out to their building. And we're basically saying, hey, landlord, we are that group. We can bring people into these buildings, and here's how. So I think blessing in disguise, we're a stronger business because of it, but we had to go through a lot of shit as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because now it's like you guys, you went through your hardest times, and now I would say this phase, or you would say is one of you're growing as fast as you ever have, right?
Yeah.
So the last question I want to ask you is, let's say it's the end of your life and you get to leave the world with three truths, three things that you know to be true about the world around you. So you're on your deathbed, you've done, let's say, everything you've done at the end of your life, you have a speakerphone to the world, three truths.
Three things that are just like things that should happen, things that are just that are real.
Three truths, things you know about that you know to be true about the world around you.
Okay. People like to laugh. There's no such thing as someone who doesn't have a sense of humor. You just got to find their sense of humor. It could be dark, it could be dry, but everyone likes to laugh. I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
So that's one. Another truth is everyone's sensitive. There's no such thing as a hardened person who's just like who's got it all figured out. Everyone has something that they're sensitive about. It's just kind of like being more real with them and understanding what makes them tick.
All right.
And then another one would be no matter what it is, people want to feel productive and like a part of society. So you could be an investment banker and work 90 hours a week. You could be a guy who bags groceries. Doesn't matter what it is, but everyone wants to feel like they're a part of society. There's no such thing as someone who's like, no, I'm good. I just like to like watch TV and not do anything. That's not real. Maybe people do it, but no one wants to do it. So I think no matter what, I think it's like honoring people who just want to feel productive and respect the differences. I think one thing that I've seen far too often is that people are like, why does he do this? Or why does she do this? And at the end of the day, they're happy doing it. So just chill out and let them be.
Yeah.
So I think we just need to kind of like it's a big world out there and respecting people's differences and letting them feel productive in their own way is a big truth.
Yeah. No, I love it. Well, I appreciate you so much for being on the podcast. Where can people follow you?
I'm at armchair 30 on Instagram. And that's probably and then obviously on my LinkedIn, Justin Stewart at
Armchair
Industrious.
30.
Armchair 30.
All right. Cool. Well,
Well,
thank
very
you
nice to meet
so
you,
much.
Alec. Thank you.
You as well.